I'd like to pretend that I'm the creative element there, but the truth is really it's people like Matthias who do that, because effectively what I do is I help people come into a company, and people like Matthias will look at a company and I'll say, okay, well let's look at how your processes work, and depending on the level of interest that I take in the company, you know, what do I need to know? I mean, looking backwards, is this a good investment, right? And looking forward, how can I make sure that I will make sure that this is a good investment in the future, whether I'm going to exit in 4 or 5 years, whether I'm going to take this to an IPO, all of those considerations come into this. But I'm not the creator. I don't come up with how to do this. And what I've seen in my experience is, you know, funds are very different. I mean, some funds are very, very active. Some funds want a lot of information. Other funds are willing to kind of sit back. But really what I help them do is create in a private framework, and that I think is the crucial factor here. You know, when I come to this, it's not about state-owned enterprises. It's very, very rarely about listed companies. It's about private companies. And there we have the one advantage that we can set all of this out in a shareholders agreement. It is a contract between the investors and the owners, where we specifically say, this is how the company is going to work. This is how frequently we will have board meetings. This is the structure of the supervisory board. You will nominate this number of people. These are the rules that we're going to apply with respect to who should be on those boards. This is the value that this person has to bring. We're able to do that, and this is, I think, the dilemma of the listed company in a sense. It has to be kind of regulated from the top down, whereas we come in and we basically create that structure for the investor. But again, you know, I don't create those things. I help them. I've seen a few things, but it's people like Matthias who come in and say, this is how we do it. And in fact, that's how Matthias sells himself to companies, because he says, I know how to do this, okay? I can take your business to the next level. So bring me on and I'll help you make even more money. That's what he does. Okay. Pretty well, actually.
Thank you, Damien. We need to have you for our PR. It's very good. But it's, I mean, essentially, it's true. I mean, now coming to Studio Moderna, clearly that's, I mean, Studio Moderna is my favorite topic, and this is probably one of the very few companies where I'm really proud to be Slovenian, because it's just an amazing company. And so where to start here? I mean, it's a, I mean, first of all, why Studio Moderna is such a great case and is such an amazing company? Because it has a visionary owner, and that's Sandy Cheshko. And the reason why Sandy is such a visionary owner is because clearly he has a vision, but he is able to rise to the level which is probably the ultimate level in being an entrepreneur, which is he's able really to step away from the operational business and really be focused on the strategy, one thing. And the other thing is he's willing and able to really employ the best possible people you can get in the world to run the business. So therefore, for example, we have a Swedish guy who is a CEO, we have an Irish guy who is a CFO, we have an English guy who is a head of e-commerce, and so forth and so forth. So therefore, we have basically a top team, and Sandy, who is confident enough of himself that he lets these guys run the business as they should, and he's really just involved in the strategic issues and bringing the company forward in terms of strategy. In other respect, I mean, Sandy is an amazing person as such, and I'm not sure whether in Slovenia people understand what kind of a role he plays in a global business and what kind of a access he has to the top decision makers on the global basis. So I think he's probably one of the 2 Slovenian people who have the access to the top decision makers globally. So in this regard, he's really able to be connected to the key trends and so forth. Now, coming back to the nitty-gritty details, which are basically the basis to be where Sandy is today. And this is, for example, I mean, which is what surprised us at the start after we did the investment. I mean, when we had the first, I mean, you see the very little details how good the company will do more or less in the corporate governance. First of all, it's very basic details, whether the board materials are prepared in time. You would be amazed how few companies are able to send you the board materials 1 week in advance in order for you to have enough time to go through this. Then the next issue which you see is what kind of a discussion you have on the board, whether you're pinned down to the operational stuff or you really are trying to analyze the different strategic scenarios and really go through the to the very important financial decisions in a different scenario analysis and so forth. So and what Studio Moderna does in this regard is incredible. Basically, And that's very true. It's that, for example, what we as Templeton, we are covering basically the whole emerging markets globally, and we are proud to be probably the biggest emerging market asset manager in the world. I mean, for example, we took Studio Moderna board materials as a benchmark for the quality of the board materials that the companies should be at least striving to produce, and this, I think, is a very firm and tangible proof that they have a top-notch corporate governance. Now, the result of this is, and I think this is basically what the bottom line and the message needs to be, is that, as Damien said, I mean, the corporate governance is really basically aimed at improving the performance. And for example, I mean, even though, as it was initially said, Studio Moderna is not a Slovenian company, but I still tend to see the Slovenian because it has a Sandy Češko being the majority owner. So therefore, in my mind, it's still at least part of a Slovenian company. I mean, if you compare Studio Moderna in terms of the results during the last 3 years, which have been the toughest years on the record in Central Eastern Europe, if you compare the Studio Moderna, and basically Studio Moderna is retail, even though it's e-commerce and telemarketing, it's still a retail business. And if you, for example, compare Studio Moderna's profitability to Mercator, I mean, it's just like these two companies would be living in two different universes, and yet they're run by, I mean, they're majority owned by the Slovenians and so forth. So it's just like, I think that, I mean, what I just don't understand, for example, is that the key owners of Mercator just don't come to Sandy and say, look, please share with us some of your views, because clearly you are doing something right and we are doing lots of things wrong. So, and basically, again, if I come back to the comparison Mercator or Mercator Studio Moderna, I know, I mean, all of these discussions regarding Mercator during the last year or two, it's completely counterproductive. There was not a single discussion and not a single question to the ex-management of Mercator. How come that the performance during the last 3 years have been deteriorating so rapidly? And this is, I mean, the whole discussion is just going the wrong way. I mean, of course it's important who buys the company, but I mean, the key and paramount importance is the underlying business. And the underlying business has been going down the drain for the last 3 years. Whereas, for example, in the same time when the Mercator's underlying business has been going down the drain, Studio Moderna has been achieving growth rates of more than 30% on an annual basis with increasing profit margins, and it has profit margins that Mercator has never ever achieved in its history, and it's just probably, I mean, way more profitable on a net profit basis than Mercator, which is just amazing. I mean, in terms, if you compare the size of the companies. So the point is that if there is a good corporate governance in the company, it's very likely that the underlying performance will be much, much better.